everybody. Thank you guys so much. Oh, he said wait.
Now go.
Oh, now go. Okay, again. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking a moment to tune in and chime in with us. In the world out there, the 10 of us are going to take couple hours and talk. Before we jump into what we're going to discuss, I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank ONYX, and I want to thank the people that are going to take a couple of hours and sit with us and have a conversation. First things first, let's talk a little bit about ONYX because this is an ONYX sponsored event. For those who don't know in the community out there, ONYX is an organization that has been created for people of color and their supporters to express their kinky and leather dynamics and to do so in a safe and informative way. ONYX was founded about 25 years ago this fall, and our mission, our three pillars, are quite simple: to educate, to empower, and to explore within the leather and kink community. Additionally, we also have fundraisers and charity events that we use to donate to larger communities and nonprofits so that our funds and our time can go to help people who are in need. Diving into today's conversation, this is going to be a panel on the Black Lives Matter movement and how it relates specifically to the kink and leather community. So let's jump in. The last 4, 5, maybe 6 months or so have been a lot for most of us, if not all of us, to deal with, considering the pandemic that we are all facing worldwide. It's forcing us to adjust to new ways of how to live, how to not be allowed to travel, to visit, to gather, to play. And all of these things have drummed up in us a new set of roadblocks. And on top of that, we've also been witness to the choking murder of George Floyd on May 29th of this year. Before George Floyd, there was Ahmaud Arbery, there was Breonna Taylor, there was Tony McDade, Dominique Fells, Aina Dior, Rhea Milton. There's so many. The list can go on and on and on. So we know that this is not a new phenomenon, but what's happened, I think, because of the pandemic, this has sort of put to the forefront the conversation of racial inequality and injustice. So we want to talk about that today. And what we're going to do is we're going to have 8 or 9 people that are going to voice their opinions and their perspectives on what's going on, how it specifically relates to the leather community. And we're going to take some time to talk about solutions. And we're going to talk a little bit about some resources that we can have as we continue to do the work. So as we do that, I would love to introduce the panel of guests that we've assembled together. And this is in no particular order. We have joining us today from San Francisco, Graylin Thornton. From the United Kingdom, ThatSandy. From Wilton Manors, Florida, Tyesha Nicole Best. From Brooklyn, New York, BlackKat, BK. Also from Brooklyn, we have Sir Wu and Slave Deedee. From Atlanta, Georgia, we have Kai Anderson. And also from Atlanta, we have Spec Black. We also have 2 amazing ASL interpreters with us this afternoon, the first of which, Glashonda Lawyer, and secondly, Ms. Cameron King. Thank you so much for your services. They are greatly, greatly appreciated. Serving as facilitator today, that would be me. I am Lynx. All right, let's get after it. This is open to the room, so anyone can chime in and we can go ahead and talk as we wish. Question number 1 for the panel. What does the Black Lives Matter movement mean to you? And what connection do you make between that and the leather and kink community? BK?
Well, actually, I'm going to let someone else answer the question. I just wanted to start off by taking a moment to acknowledge John Lewis and CT Vivian. And it's beautiful we're having this today when we think about those lives and what, when the movement kicked off. And we're often having this conversation, Black Lives Matter, as if issues started in like 19 or 2000 and whatever. But, we have to actually look at the fact that we've been in this since we've been here.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Anyone want to jump in and tackle the BLM question? What does it mean to you and how it relates to the leather and kink community specifically?
I'll jump in.
Sure.
I'll go. So for me, I think that the Black Lives Matter movement, in my head, it started out with police brutality. You know, that's what it was about, you know, the very simple thing of like, stop killing Black people. From a UK perspective as well, I think that when it first started, it was seen as an American problem, or like it was seen like, oh, this is happening over there. And I don't think, even as a Black person in the UK, I don't think that we fully clocked that actually, no, this isn't an American issue. It's a worldwide issue. You know, like obviously, I don't want you guys to think that we were ignorant to the fact that Black people are being treated unfairly all over the world. But I just think that we just associate it with police officers in America and Black people. And I think as the movement has grown and progressed and a little bit shifted even, it's kind of taken on this like, let's tackle racism, full stop, point blank, period. So for me, it feels really weird to kind of say, or just to reference it as the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it started out as that, but now it's kind of turned into this anti-racism movement, which I think is probably a really good way to kind of like phrase it as well, because it's become kind of like this bigger entity than it was originally. And not to kind of like obviously belittle the lives that have been lost in the whole movement, but it's kind of taken on this, like I said, tackling racism in every single way and shape and form. And that's why I think it relates to the leather community as well, because it's kind of like, well, let's dismantle, if we're going to do this properly, let's dismantle all of it. And there are, you know, prejudices in the leather community as well that we need to tackle. So for me, it's kind of like snowballed into this thing, which is bigger than it was when it originally happened.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else have any feedback on that?
I'd like to speak on that. You know, I was born in Birmingham in 1960, and I say that repeatedly. And then we moved to Northern California when I was 6, and that was the first time I remember ever seeing a white person. You know, growing up in Alabama, we were segregated in the 60s. So to me, everything that happened between Black and white people was quite normal. We grew up thinking that our lives didn't matter. You know, it wasn't put to us that way, but we were definitely taught that if you step out of line, you're going to be killed or your family is going to be killed. And that's just that, you know, and so there was no real pushback. Of course, the civil rights movement happened and all of that, but still in our heads, this was the way it was. And then, you know, growing up, I've seen movements come and go. So for me, Black Lives Matter is a continuation of movements that have been happening all along. And now we have the resources and we can communicate with each other much faster. You know, in the 60s and 70s, when those revolutions were happening, there was really no communication at all, you know, letters or whatever, but that just didn't happen. But now, since there is instant communication and you can record things and document things, it's really a sign of the times of things that we were started many years ago. And it's like, now, see, we told you so. You know, when we were saying it before, y'all didn't believe us, and now we can prove it. So I think Black Lives Matter is a continuation of a lot of struggles of years and years and years.
Excellent. Thank you, Graylin. Did anyone else want to take on that one? I have a follow-up right after that, if not.
I don't mind chiming in on this one. So for me, when we talk about the eradication of white supremacy and the dismantling of institutionalized racism, Black Lives Matter movement does that in many layers and aspects. And in doing so, they also subscribe to creating local power. So as someone who I grew up abroad, I didn't realize how the structures of racism applied to Americans until the Ferguson riot. And I actually ended up having a mental breakdown over the phone with with Mr. Gru. That lasted about 6 hours, and that completely changed my life. Up until then, I walked a more individualized journey and was not necessarily focused on the hurt and harm as a culture. And again, one of the reasons being, other than my ill-educated upbringing concerning this, was because, again, growing up abroad, those structures weren't so blatant as it is in America as we see it now. If I was to relate it to a kink and leather perspective, when we talk about growing power locally, for me, that includes building, creating, and maintaining spaces for and by Black people to create that safety and security. That also includes, for me personally, providing comfort, because white America does not comfort Black people ever. And I find that lack of spaces that provide comfort, especially for Black women and queers and trans people, to be lacking. And so for me personally, I definitely try to create those spaces. For me, when I talk about growing local power, that also applies to the Black culture within the leather culture, in terms of visibility and awareness, which is again another reason why I created POCL, because knowledge is power, and if you don't know where you came from and why, you're not going to understand the power and authority that you have, not only in your own private spaces but in the public scene in itself. So again, also when it comes to dismantling racism and white supremacy, that is calling out the microaggressions that we see in the kink and leather community, that is calling out the lack of inclusivity and accessibility in the leadership, not just in the leadership boards and as well as the marketing, but also in terms of membership in itself. Because it is noticeable when I see clubs and they boast of a large membership and there's no Black people, there's no brown people, where are the trans people? And yet they're saying, we are not biased based on creed, gender, and sexuality. I was like, cool, because your actions are definitely speaking louder than those words on your policies and procedures.
You know what, Tyesha, we have that coming up in a few more questions. I want to hear more from you on that bit, because that's coming in a few seconds. Thank you so much for that. I want to bring Spesh and Kai in here if I can on this next one. We've seen this sort of cycle happen over and over and over again with the taking of lives, and the list of names is hundreds, if not thousands, long. Why do you think, and this is for anyone actually, why do you think this movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, this anti-racism movement, as Sandy put it, gained greater national and global visibility and momentum after the murder of George Floyd? What was so special about George Floyd's loss of life that sort of shook the earth's crust a bit? What do you think about that?
When I think back to when this movement feels like it started to me, it was about 6 years ago with Michael Brown, but there was no video. And I feel like this was a time where you had absolutely clear video, incontrovertible proof that the police just didn't care. You couldn't turn away from it. And then I think also you've got COVID happening, and so people have time to be home and to reflect on what's going on.
Yeah,
that's why you see people in the street, because they're like, it's too much. It's too much at one time, and it had been too much. But people were, I'm busy with my life. I have other things to worry about. But now it's like the lens is focused on it, and everybody is looking in one place. And I think that's really been one of the biggest things that's tipped it over.
Kai, do you have any input?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting how Black Lives Matter came about. It was all very social, and it was all very social media based, which I think has given us a lot of fuel. Not only does an 8-minute long video give us a lot of fuel, but the fact that we can coordinate and, kind of unite under so many platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of those things come across, and they provide tools for us to be able to share experiences. So as it relates to trans people, you know, anytime you have a movement, everyone who is marginalized gets to kind of say, yes, us too. And I think Black Lives Matter has created that environment in such a beautiful way. That's so super important. That when we say, you know, and everybody will say it, you know, on television, every pundit, every politician, all lives matter, but all lives don't matter until Black lives matter and trans lives matter, and, you know, women of color's lives matter, and all of those things. And that's so, I don't understand. To me, that's it's so hard for folks to get, like, you know.
Right on. So Wu and Deedee, I see the both of you nodding. Did you want to get in there and say something?
I agree absolutely and wholeheartedly. For me, there's so many factors as to why the movement right now became so highly impactful and visible globally. Watching George Floyd for those 8 minutes and 46 seconds blew everyone's fucking
No.
You know, it blew my fucking mind, absolutely. Yeah. And it was like, oh my God. And the train, the effect that it had, and, you know, technology plays a huge part. You know, back then you didn't have a phone to record these things and, you know, show people, I am going through this, I am struggling, I have my hands up, I can't breathe. When that man yelled out, "Mama, my mama," oh my God, he called an attention worldwide. You know, I get emotional because this movement is just not one particular group. This is all Black Lives Matter. For all of us, the trans women who have been, and men who have been murdered continuously, you know, and while people try to sweep it under the rug and try to unvalidate it, I completely disagree. That needs to be highlighted just as strongly as everything that's going on, because everything has to do with this movement right here.
So did you have something?
Yeah, so I'm in the same position as everyone here. One, I'm a Black man. Two, I live in one of the most crime-ridden cities in America. So seeing the video of George Floyd, it impacted me. I was stuck for at least a day. That day I didn't say anything. Deedee looks at me like, "Are you okay, Master?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." But I was processing what I just witnessed. I tried not to watch the full video, but you know what? I needed the facts for myself. I seen the video. I'm like, okay. And it put me in his position. Now, a few things. One, I'm West Indian. So coming up, all I've seen is Black people. Don't get me wrong, there's sprinkles of white people on the island, but we had nothing like this. So when I moved here and I'm being bombarded with racism from left, right, center, back, push, it does something to me. Then the video being sent out went viral. It's like, okay, one, this is our culture now. Yes, everything's going to be videotaped. From the time Eric Garner died here in Staten Island, it's been, okay, every time you see someone with a cop or a cop is pulling someone over, grab your phone, take it out. But then the conversation switched to, okay, you take your phone out, but you're not helping the dude. You're not helping the Black person on the ground or being assaulted by a cop. All you're saying is, oh, don't do that, don't do that. So I'm saying in my head, why don't you do something? Tell the cop, yo, he wasn't doing anything. Grab the cop something. This was my feeling. Then for George Floyd, seeing him die and literally no one kick the fucking cop in the face and kick him off of him, I'd fucking go to jail. If that was the case, if I'm seeing this man die in front of me, I am going to kick you off. I'd get arrested, but at least he's going to be alive. I'm going to be alive. it struck in me. Okay, we sit here and we grab our phone to record instead of helping. We'll scream at the cop and say, okay, don't do it like that. Please stop. He can't breathe. But then what are we doing? You're not helping. Are you doing the recording?
No.
You want your little clip to go viral. Yes, it has to be seen, but there was like 7 people recording. One person has to stand up and grab the cop off. We as Black people, as POCs, if we're going to try to stop this or prevent things like this from happening again, we need to stand up and help. Helping by saying stop. That's not helping.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. BK, I have a question coming in just for you. Did you want to get in real quick here?
No, I can wait.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah. Well, no. You know what? One thing that I'm really challenged by all the Black Lives Matter conversations is because they become very convoluted, and we don't start where it starts. Black Lives Matter started as a hashtag in response to Trayvon Martin's death. And we need to say these sisters' names because we keep talking about women aren't in the conversation, queer people aren't in the conversation. Black Lives Matter was started by 3 women, 2 who identify as queer.
Absolutely.
Patrice Colliers.
And Alicia Garza. Yeah.
Right, Alicia Garza, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So, you know, we jump to this place without this understanding of where we started. And I feel often when we're having this Black Lives Matter conversation, and thank you, Graylin, for historical context, we have to have an understanding. This moment, George Floyd's moment, is this era Selma. If anyone understands when people had television in their home and they heard about racism and they couldn't fathom how bad it was, and I don't even like the term racism, they heard about violence based on race and they couldn't fathom it. When they saw it, it was so shocking, even though they had heard about it time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
We have Ron Settles, we have Rodney King, we have Ray Vitt, we have Sean Bell, we have Amadou Diallo, we have Sandra Bland. We could go on and on and on about cases we've heard of, even when we've seen them. We've seen them with a narrative that dispels what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. George Floyd, there was no narrative you could put up that would dispel what was happening. Because I haven't seen the video. I don't need to see the video.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, why would I need to see a video 8 minutes of a Black man? How many Black men have died since I've been born? I'm 53. Black women have died, Black trans people, etc. So part of the challenge is, why did us as Black people need a video?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why did we need a damn video in 2020? Like, what were you sitting at home thinking?
Well, it's always about the proof, though, right? It's always
no. If you live in a Black experience, if you live in a Black experience, no one needs to prove to you. Now, I know some white folks that maybe didn't believe, and I don't know too many of them, but I know if you live in any major metropolitan city with more than 8 Black people, if you need a video to prove it, then your Black life didn't matter to you. You've been behind the train. And you know, that's a real thing for me, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But I think with George Floyd, to the point, because we didn't have distractions and also because we didn't have our normal coping mechanisms, we have to be clear that this is a time where we couldn't go out. We couldn't go have a drink. We couldn't whatever. So we're already dealing with mental health challenges just based on COVID. Of course we snap. You know, and the world, but that's another, I'm going to stop there.
I have to agree with BK.
Tyesha, yeah, come on.
Sorry, I just have to.
Sandy, we'll go, and then Tyesha.
Oh, okay, sorry. I just have to agree with BK. Like, for a long time, for the past couple of weeks, I've been really sad and conflicted and angry about how it's all come about, because I don't like this feeling of, well, everyone else had nothing else to concentrate on, and that's when it became important. Because for me, I was like, of course this has happened. Like, this is not, to all of us, it's not a surprise that something like this has happened. However, the way that it kind of like, I suppose, imploded into everyone's consciousness doesn't sit well with me. Because it makes me feel like, oh, well, you had to make sure that your schedule had to be completely clear and your mind had to be completely clear from everything else in order for you to then recognize that Black Lives Matter. And I feel I had, people reaching out to me being like, oh my God, have you seen this, George? And I'm like, I can't even have this conversation with you in particular, because you literally have, if it's not been on your psyche months or years or whatever before, like, it really made me angry that it's just become on people's radar now. Yeah. And it's almost like I feel like I have to be grateful for the fact that COVID happened and no one else had anything else to concentrate on. But I feel conflicted about it. I still don't know how I feel, whether I should be like happy that it's come about and that people care, or that I should be angry about it, or should I be sad? Like, I just don't know how to feel. And people keep on asking me how I feel about it. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you about it, to be honest, because it's something that has been with me and for many Black people for years.
Yeah. Tyesha, you had something that you wanted to say there?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sandy.
This is really heavy for me as being a queer Black woman that kind of is one of those who creates a lot of power in the community. It's for me as a queer black person, non-binary, witness a sibling becoming an ancestor is traumatic. Watching them cross the veil violently is very traumatic. And so when people keep showing me those videos, especially white people, their lens is from a trauma porn perspective. That is a different lens than I have. Watching a sibling violently become an ancestor is traumatizing. I don't see it as entertainment. I don't appreciate it when people show me those videos. There are other ways that even I can honor my ancestors and witness their life and their journey without white people providing those resources for me. I don't want white people resources. I don't consider them resources. I consider them trying to find a way to gain approval and validity that they are doing the right thing as a white person. And the thing is that they should exhibited humanity in the first place and signed on to our movement in the first place without needing that evidence. And so I admit I came on the bus late. I'm not looking for a high five. I'm not looking, for a trophy. I came on running, without knowing how long this sprint is going to be. I came on running knowing that I'm going to have to unpack my own anti-Blackness. However, I also came on with my own toolkit and have been able to provide triage, aka comfort, to Black people, which is something that white people don't deserve. White people do not deserve comfort when it comes to the violence that they enable constantly daily. They just don't. What I provide for them is mercy, and that is different. I'm not providing you comfort. I'm providing you mercy because I am acting gracefully, even though you do not deserve it.
Thank you for that. I want to bring this back into the leather community. This is incredible, and we're doing what I wanted to do, which is great. Next up, though, I want to talk a little bit about the community itself, and this idea of racism and prejudice and bias. Has that, over the time that you've been in the community, particularly Graylin, BK, Sir Wu, has racism, bias, prejudice, any of that affected your view over the evolution of the leather community? since your, I guess, introduction to it? And if so, how has that changed?
I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
For me, I'll be honest, I haven't had much towards me. I get the little microaggressions here and there, and I get the stares, but that don't stop my train. My goal coming into the lifestyle was I wanted the dynamic. I'm not here to feed you. I'm not here for you to fetishize me. I'm here to do what I came to do. If you like it or not, I don't give a fuck. I'm here for me. So for our counterparts, I try not to let them, get to me. I brush it off. If the little microaggressions, sometimes when we're in a scene, I'll tell Kat, look at this motherfucker here, and I'll just keep it moving. But other than that, I brush it off.
Cool. Anybody else?
Vern Stewart said to me when I was in my 20s, which was in the, oh my God, that was like in the 80s. So, God, that's kind of shocking. Sorry. But Vern Stewart said to me, this is not about you. It's not about you at all. It's about every other Black man and Black woman who want to live a life in BDSM. And he was saying that because I was going about, living in San Francisco in our little bubble, and you don't realize you're in a bubble until you get out of the bubble. But, I was living in San Francisco in this bubble, and my leather life was based on skill. I surrounded myself by some of the best players in the world because they were in San Francisco. And I learned from them because I wanted to be one of the best players in the world. So as my skill set grew, doors opened to me to play. But while I was going and playing and having all this good time, I thought that younger Black people would have the same experiences that I had, that all they had to do was go play. And I left behind a lot of young Black men and women thinking that it was going to be as easy for them as it was for me. And it took me a while. It took Vern to point out that, no, everything that you do, Black people are watching, and they want to be doing some of those things too. And it's up to you to basically grab them and pull them up. I mean, I met BK when we were young. And, I remember when he was going through his stuff, and I felt it was my responsibility to be there for him and for every other young Black person coming up. I had it easy, but most do not.
Yeah. BK, you want to get in there?
Oh yeah, definitely. And yes, Graylin, I call him Onk, Vern. I was really blessed, and it was an interesting time. For me, because there's BDSM, kink, is playing all that. Then there's the leather community. See, there is a very different dialogue.
Yeah.
And the leather community is just white folk coming in the leather, putting on gear, being white folks in gear. Like, we get in this head, like, all of a sudden, because you're kinky, you understand all the challenges of all the different people of the world. That's just not reality, because when you take that off, you go back to white world. And for me, it was really big because I'm the first, Graylin especially can identify, he was really the only, no shade to anybody else, only Black Mr. Drummer. And I was the first Black American leather man. Right. And it was a whole thing then around that as you represent in the community. Because at that time I had locks. I custom on my leather gear, so it was red, black. I mean, I was Black as shit. I'm a Black motherfucker. So everybody was trying to wrap their head around this motherfucker's so Black. My boys were Black, my partners, but like everybody was Black. You're like, we have never even seen anything like this. what do we do with this? To the point, there was an article, and they told me I had to call myself African American. I'm like, yo, I've never been African American. That works for whoever it is. I've always been Black. So even in this concept of people trying to do the right thing, there's still this space of we don't know what to do with you identifying so much as you. To the point that when I was a couple years after my title year, I bounced. I was like, yo, enough of all this. Because I was playing before I got to the community. But one significant thing I want to say for people who've seen the book, Fucking Unadulterated Nasty Kink, Funk, the book that we did, the reason it was born was because I was in a bar, another bar, and there was an ad, you know, for the bar that was 20 somebody. One was Latino, and he was very fair-skinned. And I said, if nothing else, what we have to do, to Graylin's point, is create, for me, it was creating product that no matter what anybody says, you can hold it up and say, yo, there's some colored people that wear leather and they got chaps and shit. They're not Thomas Finland and Hun drawing. They're real people. So yeah, you know, for me, that's kind of my experience with race and leather and all that stuff.
Yeah, you know, there's this idea, I guess, that's in the community, the larger community, that, you know, leather is a space where we can all come and not feel judged and not feel this or that, and we can be ourselves and we can let loose and we can wild out. You know, and I read this the other day on somebody's post, and I said, you know, when I walk into a space, no matter where it is, they see me, but they see my skin color first. So it's not easy for me to just walk into a room and let go, because the first thing I think about is, shit, I'm here with people who don't look like me. What are they going to say? And then here come the proverbial theys. What are they going to think? If I don't speak a certain way, look a certain way, use the right words, wear the right clothes, am I then going to be viewed as less than because I am not what has been before? Right? So there are a whole lot of things that we go through as people of color that white people never, ever have to think about. They just don't, period. You know, so that sets a standard for us before we even open our mouths. And that's the thing that I think people who scream all lives matter are missing. It has nothing to do with this life, that life, your life, my life. It's the fact that we have to do this amount of shit first before we're even seen, let alone heard or given respect, right? That's my. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. You touched the nerve there, bro. Anybody else want to get in on that before we move on to the next one?
No, I want to say something back with you know, I just don't normally call you BK, so I'm trying to get used to that.
Call me whatever.
So, you know, one other thing too is, you know, when we get together and we go into a dungeon or a play space and all of that, and if we're allowed to have that experience, at some point we have to go home. And home for us is, you know, our grandmama's house, our church, our all of that tells us we shouldn't be in those spaces to begin with. So we don't have the comfort of going back home and saying, this is what I did, because, you know, we say that to our other Black friends, they're looking at us funny too. So, you know, we go to a place where we couldn't look that funny. We go home and talk to our Black friends. They looking at us funny. So we're constantly have this pulling back and forth of, I want to be me, and you don't want me to be me, and you don't want me to be me. So where do I get to be me? You know, so we have to fight from both angles all times.
I think
agreed. Sorry.
I want to kind of speak to. Let me preface this with, I have been in the leather scene since the age of 19, back in the Dallas Eagle days when I had to get my hand stamped because I wasn't 21 to go into the bar. 12, 13, maths later, 12 years minimum, I am still in this community. And what I want to speak to is the lack of accessibility for those who are Black, who didn't grow up in San Francisco, LA, but grew up in cities that didn't have a large leather or kink community, or cities that didn't have large quantities of Black kinksters and LeatherFolk. The stress and the amount of the high standard for me specifically that I had to have being in a leather scene that was predominantly white was ridiculous. Sadly, I still keep that standard because that was how I was raised as a preacher's kid and a military brat. But that standard that came from white people of like, you're the token, therefore you are the litmus, you are the archetype, whatever, led to me having to not have the liberty to enjoy my journey as much as I was able to because of me having to represent a populace due to white people being incapable of being welcoming to Black people.
Right.
So I think also when we think of intersectionality, there is a level of privilege for those who grow up in Black leather scenes and Black kink scenes versus those of us who didn't and who also found our home later. I do enjoy so much being an Onyx Pearl. There is such a difference between going into the larger leather and kink scene, and I separate them specifically because leather is completely different than kink in terms of culture, versus going into an Onyx hospitality suite with the music is all turned up. You can do the AAV, AVI type language. Hey, bro, what's up? What the fuck? Like,
and get you some punch.
Different. Get you. We are not talking about the punch. But I also want to hold space for those like me who were young in the community, who was not able to get those Black mentors and not able to find those Black organizations and not able to find those Black clubs, and who was like constantly breaking the glass ceiling constantly. I can't tell you how many glass ceilings I keep breaking. And I'm only turning 36 this year, but I want to get a shout out to those who were holding space for those one or two individuals in their geographical locations, because you did make a difference. I'm sure I made a difference. And now that we are in our current time, we have that ability to operate and love in a peaceful manner and enjoy our own leather and kink without having that scrutiny and judgment from white people.
Thank you so much. Spesh and Kai, did you want to get in there and say something?
Yeah. When I think about, well, I'll start this way. I came into the leather community through Onyx. So I can't imagine if you were a young Black person coming into the leather community not through Onyx and not having this kind of support. You walk into a leather event and it's a sea of white faces and you're like, well, I mean, people are friendly. That's not necessarily the issue, but I am always listening for somebody to say something out of the side of their mouth, right? So, and then I go to these events. I go to MAL. It's my favorite event, and the main event for me is to go to the Onyx Suite because I came there to see my brothers and to catch up with people that I haven't seen for the whole year. And yeah, I see other people, but like the main thing is the fellowship there. But there are some sort of complex layers for me. Because there's the acting outside of Onyx, there's the objectification that comes from white people, but then there's also a second layer of objectification as a trans person, and being fetishized for that. So sometimes I struggle with feeling 100%. Well, not just welcome, but like a part of things, because again, I'm always listening, and it's important that if I'm gonna play with you, that I trust you. I mean, I trust that the thoughts running through your head are the right ones, and maybe like, and I'm in therapy trying to like figure out how much can I ask of people, but I don't think it's too much to ask for your most intimate relationships, because BDSM relationships are some of the most intimate that you'll ever have. Ask that people see you all the way. And so right now, and I never would have said this 10 years ago, but I don't play for the most part with white men because unless I know that they are actively anti-racist and I can trust that, I can't, like, it's you know what, it's an internal betrayal is what it is. And I'm about no longer engaging in things that are an internal betrayal in my life.
Nice. Kai, anything?
You know, and I'll continue that thread. You know, that wasn't always something I could echo. I wanted to play and experience and fuck and have sex and do all the things with everybody. But all of these things that are present in our lives today make me have to do the same thing. Have to evaluate. Are you really coming for me because you're for me? There's too many things in my life already that many of us have echoed and talked about that, you know, when I go home to my family, I have to be this person. My family doesn't even see me as I see myself as a trans person or any of that. So that's an opportunity where I have to go be someone else. When I'm in spaces with my brothers, I feel like that's the only time that you get to kind of bring yourself, your true self. But you also have to check yourself because not everybody sees you the way you see you. And so they'll remind you about that. So like when he said, you know, you got to keep your ears open and wait for somebody to say something sideways. It's a lot of pressure to have to always carry that. So, you know, Onyx has been the one true space in which, even though there's issues, for the most part, 80%, you know, people that you're interacting with see you, appreciate you, love and respect you. And that's been a beautiful thing.
Before we get on, thank you so much. Before we get on to the next one, and after this one coming up, we're going to take our break. But I need to say this here, particularly after what the three of you just said here. I am waiting on the time when we can get into a space and not have to keep an ear out for things that people say sideways, so that we don't have to have that sixth sense waiting for someone to be inappropriate so that we're ready to tackle that and address it. I am waiting where that's no longer needed. I may die before it ever comes, but I am waiting to get to the point where each of us on this panel and everyone out there watching can go to an event, can go to a bar, can go to a country, can go to a park and not have to be on alert for someone acting stupid. You know, I'm waiting on that. And again, I may be 107 years old when that happens, but that's, you know, that's what I'm waiting for. The next question before we head to break is going to be for Tyesha and Sandy specifically, because this is sort of a broader international response that I'm looking for. How is the Black Lives, in your experience and in your point of view, how is the Black Lives Matter movement viewed internationally? And is that movement different in other countries, in your opinion?
So like I said before, I think that when it first came about, maybe it was viewed as an American thing in the UK. But I think now that we've kind of progressed the conversation so much further along, it's kind of empowered Black people in the UK to speak up and be like, oh, no, we're not taking this as well. Do you know what I mean? And bring up our own kind of issues with the police and authority figures and stuff like that. So for me, it's taken on a whole new realm and invigorated and empowered people here to really kind of stand up and unite as well. Like, I definitely feel like with Black people here that we're kind of like united. Just the other day, in fact, on my road, a group of maybe 6 Black boys were in a car together and they were stopped and the police officers like were kind of like patting them down, and all of us were kind of like waiting and like just to see what was going to happen. And obviously, like, just like you said, to kind of jump in and help, you know. So, and I live in a very kind of, it's very Bangladeshi and very Black community. So it's kind of given us a voice, I would say, and kind of lit a fire underneath us to recognize that actually this is a problem over here too, and how can we tackle it, and how can we lend our voices to our brothers and sisters around the world, you know. So that's in some ways I'm grateful for that, because it's kind of it's nice to kind of feel that unity.
And Tyesha, you come from sort of the Central America, South America sort of region with Panama. Am I not mistaken? Am I incorrect in that? Like,
I am half Panamanian.
But you grew up all over the world, though, right?
Yeah. I was born in Nuremberg, Germany. Lived in Naples, Italy, Panama. And for me, to answer your question from a lens of someone who had who grew up with more cultural diversity than black culture. Like for real, like it's one thing to have parents like, oh, I really want you to have a diverse culture, and then be like, oh, oops, we forgot to teach you your own fucking black culture. Thanks. So to answer your question, the Black Lives Matter movement will go down in U.S. history as the largest movement against oppression in history. And the reason is every state was protesting, and not just that. You had people in Asia, Japan, China. You had people in Africa, and the ability. What changed this time was the ability for people to be able to find our experience relatable. So when you talk about how Hong Kong for a long time has been fighting oppression from a social political standpoint too, and then you see them witness us with a white president being oppressive to a large demographic, they found it relatable, and that's why you had those TikTok people buying those seats at the Trump little kind of rally, and then those seats were empty. It's because they realized how relatable it was.
Yeah.
Like, let me help these people out. Like, this cool is what the fuck? And so when you think from an international perspective, and for how long for me to witness, again, even in England, Black Lives Matter protests, and them not just protesting for us, but also for themselves as well. They were realizing it's when they come to their own epiphany, their own oppression, and who is oppressing them, there is some power and some unification, and that is what has occurred. And to witness that for so long without distraction, because the protest against police brutality in this iteration went on for weeks. And it was the fact that when you think of it from a news media perspective, when the U.S. news died down, you saw the international news people being like, "Oh, well, in our country they protesting too," and then the U.S. had to pick those news stories up and be like, "Well, they over here in the UK and Japan being like, what the fuck, white people in America." And then
what the fuck, white people?
And then us in America was like, yeah, what the fuck? You know what? Fuck y'all. Fuck y'all.
And that's the thing, right? That's the thing, is that there's so many more of us than them. And it's not about us versus them, but once the collective us realizes our strength, and we realize that we can move mountains, if we realize that every one of us who looks like one of us can relate to a moment in our lives where we were treated less than, there are many more of us than there are of them. And if we collectively get together and say enough is enough and too much is foolish, this is what happens in the world, right?
And I think people are only starting to clock that, which is amazing to see. And you can see the stories being shared online of people being like, oh, you had this experience. Oh, hi, I have this. Oh, you've had that. And connecting the dots. And that's when, fuck the white people is coming into play, which I love now. That's going to be my thing.
Cool. We got about 5 minutes. Sandy, I want to put this straight to you, if I may. People who are watching, everyone knows ThatSandy, right? Everyone knows who you are from your connection with Recon, right?
Yeah.
You are ThatSandy. So considering what's happened here in the last 8 to 12 weeks with regard to Recon's position on preference and their statement, we don't want to ignore the elephant in the room. Is there anything that you would like to say about that from your point of view, or at all addressing it?
I mean, I said what I said, and people are mad about it. People are mad about it. Like, in all honesty, like, when you asked me to be part of this panel, I had to really take a second to really think about whether I wanted to do it or not, because the amount of hate that I've received as a consequence of putting that statement out is shocking. Like, it was the last 4 weeks have probably been the most toughest time. And I've worked for Recon for like 7 years now, and it's been super tough. Like there have been days where I can't open my laptop to look at what I need to do because people had problem with the fact that it's really funny that white people don't like being called white people. That was my first thing. They don't like it. They don't like being called white people. So basically, I'll go into a bit of detail in case you didn't know. I woke up one morning. Someone sent me a tweet about another platform. I won't name them, but I think it's obvious who it is. Who have decided to remove their ethnicity filter, and they said it in a way that was like, with everything that's going on with George Floyd, we've decided to remove our filter and we've ended racism on our platform. Da, 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 da. And I was like, well, that's how it felt. That's how it felt. It felt like, oh, yay, that's it. Yay, racism is over. Woo-hoo. And I'm like, hold on a second. First of all, people have been asking you to remove this filter for years. And it's not just removing the filter, it's tackling the issue of racism and sexual racism on their platform. So by removing their filter, yes, maybe that is one way to solve it. However, you have not spoken about what you're doing about reporting tools on your platform. You're not speaking about what you're going to do about language on people's profiles. There are so many other things that you're not doing or addressing that for me, it felt like lip service. It felt like, and I was angry. I was angry that basically as a consequence, as one of the biggest gay dating platforms has done, I'm now getting grief from people being like, this kind of like, well, what's Recon going to do? It's been really stressful because the thing is, I have an opinion. My team obviously has different opinions, and we're all, I would like to think that my team is quite diverse, so for me as in charge of this brand, I had to make a decision with them about what we were going to do about it, because people were knocking on my door like no one's business. And what was really funny to me was there were people that I see on the scene, and I'm talking white people on the scene, whenever I go to these events, because I have the luxury of traveling to all these different events, who claim to love me and blah, 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 blah. Calling Recon out. And I'm like, hold on a second. You know that I'm behind this. As a black man, you know that I'm not going to do my people bad like this. So why are you acting like, so I felt really angry about it. I had to block people, unfollow people. As soon as I put the statement out, come and see these people slide into my DMs being like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that point of view. I basically put out a statement saying that, people of color can use the ethnicity filter to find other people of color, especially in the fetish community, in the kink community, when there's not a lot of us. We have to find a way to find other people so that we can relate to each other. So you're only thinking about it from a white point of view, and building a platform based on white people is really, really dangerous. At the end of the day, this platform, who I won't name, but it's obvious who they are, have not solved the issue of racism. They are just basically, they've taken a tool away from a racist and more or less made their platform bend to the actions of a racist, as opposed to sitting down with people of color and thinking about like, well, actually, how can we make the whole platform safer and better? And that's what I wanted to do. And that's what my team wants to do. But the problem was that we need an answer now. Everyone was like, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? And I was like, this isn't a thing that can be solved tomorrow, guys. Like, removing the filter is not going to do this. So it's been stressful.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's the thing. I didn't want it to seem like we were bullied into removing something just because someone else had done it without a second thought to it. That was my issue. And I hope that people felt that we took a considered approach. And the thing is, it's not over. We're going to put a survey out and all this kind of stuff and talk to people of color on our platform. And it might just turn out that people of color want it to be gone, because I can't speak for all black people. Right. And the fact that I am a representative of Recon and I am black, yes, that's a great thing. But I don't want to speak for every one of us. And I think it's really unfair for people to do that. So it's been tough, if I'm being honest, and it's I even just got a message today from someone on Recon saying, well, it's really odd how now Recon's content has changed. So it's like all black faces. I think you're overcompensating. Do you not think that? And I'm like, with everything that's going on, don't you think that it's good that black voices are being heard on the platform?
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I think you're overcompensating. And I'm just like, and I can't block these people. Well, I can block them. I did block him. But I mean, in terms of like, I have to read the good comments, the positive comments. I have to read the negative comments, because some people brought out some really interesting points about like, well, have you thought about this? And I was like, no, I hadn't thought about this. I'm going to put that in my back pocket.
Yeah.
I had to read all of it, and it's been horrible to have to take on. I can't. There are days where I can't block it out because it's my job.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm Godspeed, and let those of us who can know what we can do to help, because it sounds like it's not over. Thank you for that, guys. We're at the halfway point. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break. We're not going to disconnect during the break, but this is a chance for people to refresh their cocktails or beverages or hummus or whatever.
Hummus.
I know, like, who got
it's dinner time for some people in the world. I don't know.
I didn't know we were having hummus.
There's lunch.
But we'll be back in 10 minutes. We'll pick it up at 5:12 Eastern Standard Time, and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and the panel. This has been more than I could hope for. So thank you for your voices. We got some more coming your way. All right. See you guys in 10.
Oh, I'm getting a beverage too.
Hello. I don't know. Do we need to? Oh. Oh no. I'm trying to use the bathroom and whatnot. Oh, okay. Got you. All right. Okay. See you later. No. Okay, is everybody back? Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. That's a song, isn't it? All right, so as people chime back in and everyone gets back in, I want to say thanks. We spent the last hour or so talking about the movement itself and how it's affected us individually within the community and on a larger scale, being Black in the world today. The next hour or so, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some solutions, some suggestions, and some resources that we and our viewers can use and implement as we do the work we need to do to seek out some real change. So we'll jump right in. In your opinions, what are some questions that people can ask themselves as they start to do the work of self-policing and trying to adjust their thinking and the thinking of people in their houses, their workplaces, their bowling alleys, their Trader Joe's, bars, wherever they go? What are some questions people can ask themselves and ask of others? If we can get that mute in the back, wherever the siren's coming from. Thank you. And so, yeah, the questions out there. What are some questions people may want to think about asking themselves as they begin to do this work?
Are you specifically speaking of white people or all people?
Why not both?
Because it's different work for each.
Absolutely different approach.
I think so. Well, let's start with white people first, and then we'll move it and we'll broaden it out to what we can do for ourselves as we continue to help our siblings along the way.
You know, one of the things that I've been saying to white people is look at your history in terms of entertainment. You know, when you were younger and you're watching The Lone Ranger and all those shows, did it ever occur to you that he might be Black? You know, when you were watching The Dukes of Hazzard, did it occur to you that they had a Confederate flag on the car? You know, all those things. Just look at yourself in terms of the visuals that you got growing up and ask yourself, why didn't those things occur to you then? And do a list. Actually, just do a long list of all those things that you saw, all those hints that we gave you growing up because you didn't take the hints. And now we're saying, okay, now that you know that those things didn't bother you, are they going to continue bothering you? You know, did you read Uncle Tom's Cabin? You know, did you watch Roots? You know, we've been giving you these hints for years and years and years. They've always been there, but you didn't pick up on the imagery. So now, you know, take a look at your life and look at the imagery and look at the things that you just let slip by for the sake of entertainment, because that really will tell you what you thought about us as a people.
Graylin, I really like that. Yeah, I wanted to speak to that a little bit today. I was reading this Reddit thread, and it was a video of somebody using like edging clippers on somebody's hair. And so many of the comments were about how they don't understand why people get haircuts like that, or how those kind of like a lineup looks terrible on white people. And then there was one that threw me for a loop. The lady said her boyfriend went to a neighborhood barbershop. He was a white guy, got his hair lined up. And it was the first time that had happened. So he came home and she started laughing. And then she was like, actually, I really hate it because it makes him look aggressive. And I was like, so this idea about implicit bias or unexplored biases that people have. So she thinks that a lineup looks aggressive. So does that mean that she thinks all Black men look aggressive because we line our hair up? Like, there are all these things I think that are hidden underneath that people aren't really thinking about all the time. And those are the things that they need to like wake up and understand.
Yeah.
I think that helps people like open their eyes and say, oh, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm part of it.
Yeah, you know, and another thing that yeah, you're absolutely right. And a thing that sort of jumps out at me as I listen to y'all and reflect is, you know, one of those questions could be why, as a white person, and I can only assume because I'm not one, but why don't I feel comfortable checking my friends when they behave in a way that I know is not proper, that is not correct, that is not supportive of someone who doesn't look like them? You know, if I'm in a restaurant somewhere and I hear Jody say something off-putting, why am I not the first one to say, hey, that's fucked up what you just said, and here's the reason why? You know, that piece about where's the harm in being that person to check my friends when I see them or hear them behaving in a way that I don't agree with, but you know, just saying, well, that's their thought, that's on them, that's not me, that's them. You know, where's the labor in correcting that if they want to see positive change, right? Does anyone understand where I'm trying to come from with that?
Yeah. So my answer is I'm gonna try and make my answer not be as long as I think it's gonna be, because you have to. For me, I'm gonna approach it. So there's two approaches that I'm gonna use. I'm gonna use the approach in terms of career, professional life. I am currently working on dismantling white supremacy within my company as it applies to policy. And I think it was Spec that brought up the hairstyles. If anyone was to Google right now professional hairstyles, it is only white hairstyles. If someone was to Google unprofessional hairstyles, it would be all black hairstyles. That is Google. So, you know, when you have HR departments going on, you know, how should I rate my policies? And then they go and Google, that's what they get. So when you think from it from a professional standpoint, racism exists in a professional environment from like step one. HR and the culture of HR helps create the cultures of companies. So if your HR policies are racist, then the company is going to be racist itself. If for instance you are not allowed to wear Bantu knots because someone says it's unprofessional, that means they're saying that they are themselves are racist. And for me, my work on the professional side is dismantling that. It is making our uniform policies gender neutral. It's bringing back hairstyle language that isn't biased towards Black people. So that's professional side. If I'm going to apply your question to the kink and leather side, I actually wrote a rubric recently to actually have white people ask these questions of themselves, of which applies to their fetishes and DS dynamics. One of those questions being, do you understand the historical context and constructs that surround your dynamic and or fetish? Another question is, if you have found controversial history or constructs rooted in racism and white supremacy, have you researched their current involvement in your reality? So I wrote these questions to help them separate reality from fantasy, because oftentimes what I have found from white people is they enable their reality by creating fantasies which have less rules that are illegal in the reality. So this is talking about race play, for instance, and this is why a lot of Black people don't want to do race play with white people, because how do you know that their version of race play is just a fantasy version of what they do in reality? Right? So another question I asked, and I labeled this chapter cultural accountability. Another question I asked is, have you done your due diligence in continuing to unpack any racism, microaggression, white supremacy, sexism, transphobia that you may have inherited by birth, past trauma, or miseducation? Another one that I asked is, are your political and social affiliations aligned with any dynamics or fetishes that are considered offensive, taboo, or controversial? I.e., are you a Republican voting for Trump even though you are in the leather community saying that you believe in diversity and inclusivity? That is a direct contradiction of what you are applying in your fantasy world. So, another question you have to ask yourself if you're a white person, how often do you support marginalized populaces by participating in their organizations, clubs, political positions, financially, physically, or politically? So, this question would be for Onyx members, and I'm sure Onyx members have thought about it. How many white people show up to your event when you make those events public? Do you see white people? How many white people are affiliate members of your clubs? And for me, that tells me how my community feels about us as an organization and culture within that subculture of leathering. I mean, I could go on. It's gonna be published eventually, but these are the rubrics that I think that you should consider is analyze your reality and then use that reality as your rubric to determine whether or not you are self-aware enough to create a fantasy from that reality.
Excellent. BK.
Yeah. So what I'm going to say isn't going to sit well with a lot of people, and I'm going to say it. Decades ago, I was at a POC forum, and a white man raised his hand and was called upon and asked, well, what, as a white man, can I do something, something, something? I said, absolutely nothing. I still feel that way, to a degree. Now, and that's why I don't like saying the word racism. Systemic racism is a very specific thing and has to be worked on a very specific way. And a lot of the white folks we know and can't do it no how, because they are just as powerless in those settings. They just have benefits from them. So let's be clear about that. They don't necessarily run that world either. Those are very small groups of people running very large institutions. Now, that being said, Black folk, and I'm gonna get real with this. I do believe it's different work. At the same time, there's a lot of questions Black folks still have to ask Black folk. Because a lot of Black folk then went from being in white world very happy that they bought dashikis last week and they done started doing this bullshit. Now, I'm gonna be real. You know, I grew up, my mother was a member of SNCC. My father was involved with the Panthers. I grew up in the 70s. I was engaged by the time I was 5. I knew Betty Shabazz, Stokely Carmichael. I'm about to say Amir Baraka, but at that point he would have been Leroy Jones. So I grew up in Black culture in a very different way. And I think, what we have to do is heal our shit. Because as soon as we go into white people, it becomes about white people. How many Black Lives Matter signs have we seen held up by white people? Like, we still have to ingrain ourselves in what is it in us that we haven't connected with us. Like, we haven't seen our beauty. We don't exist in our talent. We don't exist in our triumph. We talk about our DNA as pain. We talk about struggle. We talk about all this. All that stuff is there. And if we started to talk about white people differently, so let's take DNA. Let's take this for an example. Our conversation is Black people have been slaves. White people have been slaveholders. Less than 1% of white people in America had slaves. So they was fucked up too. They came here, they were criminals that were kicked out of their country. Immigrants who couldn't get jobs in their country. That's in their DNA. What they've done differently is created propaganda and a narrative that supports them being something different and supports us being something different. What we have to get to in our questions itself is our true narrative. And that's why this is disruptive right now on the real. This is disruptive right now because all that shit from centuries of all that bullshit and lies they've told us is starting to erupt. We are coming out like, yo, that's some bullshit. Like, we are learning who we are. And the more we do that, impacts what happens on the street. Because there's the systemic issue and then there's what's on the street. In reality, most of us just live on the street. We might know somebody who X, Y, and Z, but most of us live on the street. And that's where, for me, let me say my work and what I do is why I do what I do. Is because I know that there's truth of us that has been held. And to Graylin's point, when you look at media, if you go back to, oh my God, if we were to look at memorabilia, Black memorabilia in America, and we look at all that coon stuff and all that shit was created intentionally. Even a quick story, watermelon. Black folk and watermelon. Black folk don't want to eat watermelon in public because white folks gonna think they too blah blah. Watermelon was the largest source of income for Black people when they were freed from slavery. White people created a narrative around watermelon so we would detach ourselves from it so that they would own it as an industry. These are the kinds of things we have to understand about propaganda and what's happening. That's for me. So, I'll leave it. Now, white folk, they got to do something. They got a #1 bestseller. Even in racism, a white woman got the #1 New York Times bestseller on white fragility. So I think they know what to do with themselves. But we got to get our shit together.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you all for that. Our next question, in the same vein, but in a different direction. What can we say, or what do we say to white people that want to get involved in our movement, but don't know how to get started because they're told this is our space, this is our time, step back. If they step back, then they're told that they're not using their privilege to help us. So they're confused. What do you say to that?
Real quick to them, I say Google is your friend. Google is your fucking friend. Long story short, I know of a situation where people were trying to organize something and trying to figure out where they should place their donation, right? Where they should send a donation. There are a plethora, hundreds of places you can place your donation. Find one that doesn't seem like, oh, you're just doing it just because you're trying to feel not guilty about your privilege. Help them. It takes more than just saying, okay, you know what, I got a little extra $100. I want to show that I am not against Black people or against Black Lives Matter, and send it to it. You need to then continue. You can say you got you can say you have Black friends. That doesn't mean shit anymore. Literally.
Never did.
Well, to that point.
Period.
To that point too. And then one of my favorite ones that I got hit from my boss. Oh, I have Black co-workers. I have Black workers. The fuck you don't. You don't know me. Don't just say that, oh yeah, we have Black workers here. You're not the only one. That don't mean shit. Show up and show out for us. Like Sir Eli says, show up and show out. Don't just say or do something behind closed doors. That doesn't do anything. That doesn't help the narrative.
Yeah. I remember seeing some people back in Minneapolis after George Floyd. People would run over to the shrine and snap a picture and post it on the. I'm here. I'm involved. Look at me. I'm participating. And then you never hear or see from them again. They got their check mark off the list of things to do to.
Yeah, and their likes
to show.
And their likes.
Yeah, and their likes. Yeah.
It's more than likes now.
Yeah.
Okay, than a hashtag.
Fine. The incident happened. You took your pictures. We're now at a point where the conversation is still continuing. The fight is still going on. It's still work to be done. We as Black people, a lot of us, especially right now in this conference, we're taking that step. The conversation has to be had. After the conversation, it's time for action now. We can't just keep talking and talking about it. Shit has to move. We got to move. So if you, as an ally, want to move with us, get on the bandwagon. Don't just say you got Black friends. Tell your Black friend, hey, I'm going here and I'm going to do this. Can you come with me? Ask a question. Talk to us. It's time to move now. It's time to get shit going.
Nice. Show up and show out. I dig it. So by converse, moving on to the next one, by converse, if we expect white people to educate themselves, is what I'm hearing, Google it and hear the questions, to educate themselves on what it means to be an accomplice or to be an ally or to be a supporter, if we expect them to go out and get the knowledge and not come to us to do the labor for them, then how do we hold Black and brown people accountable for the same education with regard to our trans and non-binary siblings that make up the community as a whole? You know, if I'm going to tell Karen to do her part on her own and hold her accountable for what she's doing, how then am I going to, or how should I then talk to whomever else on this side and say, yo, do the work?
I would like to answer it. I also would like to make mention to be careful with your words, because I have been watching the comment section, and some things that need to be said just for Black people, there's a reason, because white people can interpret it differently, and then that's when they start applying the all lives matter narrative, which I saw. So I'm just gonna say, be careful what you say with the audience that you have. And I'll start with that. To answer your question,
no, being careful with what we need. That's the fucking problem. If they don't want to get it, they're intentionally not getting it. I'm not going to censor myself. No, and I'm
not saying to censor it.
On and on conversation. I don't have time to look at a fucking chat. White people know what they're doing every given fucking moment. So this is a space to have this real dialogue, and we're gonna have it the fuck for real. If they don't like it, they can switch off and go to AFA or some other motherfucking site.
Yes, fuck them. I'm not saying not say to fuck them. I'm saying fuck them, and I don't want to.
No, but you're telling us to be aware of the language we use in our space. That's what we need to stop.
I'm tired of white people appropriating Black shit because they lean in, and then they use then they apply capitalism on it and take our dollars and take our dollars.
If you put on a suit and tie, they're going to beat your ass the same way. You have to understand it.
Yes, and
okay, well, y'all go ahead. If you want to tap dance and yes and do all that, that's fine. But I didn't sign up for that. I thought this was a real fucking dialogue. And of course, in any real dialogue, people are coming here to do whatever they're coming with. So you can't shift your dialogue or watch what you say so they won't X, Y, and Z. That's their agenda.
I'm saying that they were made comfortable enough to say white lives matter, and I'm glad they got blocked.
They're going to do it anyway. They do it in everything they do. They march through your neighborhood with a Black Lives Matter sign, meanwhile gentrifying it and moving all the Black people out. All the energy for white people. Fuck them. Have the conversation.
So continuing the conversation, to answer the question is, I have witnessed many people, and I'm speaking specifically because it was said to talk about the Black people. I have witnessed many Black people in the Black leather community be transphobic to other trans people while purporting to be allies in general, and that is unacceptable. I have witnessed many Black people in this community watch trans people and women and queer women and silently witness their struggle publicly on these social media platforms and not saying shit, but when it's relatable to them, that is when they speak up. I find that unacceptable, because also what that narrative does is it puts Black women in this angry Black woman stereotype perspective, and then because we are not covered by our own siblings, we are left out hung to dry as if we are not making any sense, and I find that unacceptable. So these are the conversations that I feel need to have happen, because I am tired personally of doing all of this labor publicly on social media, because you want to know what? Social media is also not going away. White people and Black people find their realities and their validities on social media. It matters that Black men back up trans Black people and Black women and queer women. I am tired of seeing the silence. So if we want to talk about being real, then I would like to see this much passion and aggression to protect our Black trans leather and kink people, and to allow them to come into the group without being uncomfortable about changing bylaws in your organization, and being uncomfortable of not being allowed to fetishize trans people. And then I can come sit at this table and think that I am sitting with people who believe in equity.
Yes, go ahead, Sir Wu.
Tyesha, that's it, right? I can speak from myself and my point of view. This pandemic has been a fucking journey for me. As a het male leather man, it has been a journey for me. My slave has further opened up my eyes. Like she told me that she told me a few days ago that she's proud of me for opening my, what did you say? To opening my mind?
Well, you know, West Indian men are not known to love all brothers. You know, they are transphobic, they are homophobic. And, you know, he has taken time and liberty to reach out to the trans siblings, to non-binary siblings, and as well as educate himself, like actually read and have uncomfortable conversations so that he's aware of everything around him. I congratulate him for that, because not many West Indian men are out here doing that. You know, West Indian men are taught to hate. That's bad. You shouldn't do that. And he's going outside of his norm and teaching those around him.
Now, to that, I won't say the teaching part yet, because
teaching your fellow West Indians to, you know, love your brother no matter what.
That's my I won't say mission, my try to mission, because, you know, West Indians are a little fucking ignorant, but it's for me, it was literally to sit back and watching the queer community and the trans community, literally seeing what they go through, that opened my mind even further. When I came into the lifestyle, I was pretty open-minded. I'm a freak, I'm kinky, I like, you know, the good shit. But sitting back and taking the time to actually understand us as a community, not just leather, but as a human community, our aggressions and microaggressions towards trans folk is fucking disgusting. If any of you who are listening and hear me, take the time to watch Disclosure on Netflix. That shit blew my mind to the microaggressions, to the actual aggression that we as a world take on. I can't say from male or female. I can't say from queer. We as a world, because that it's been going on for centuries, not decades, not a month, for centuries. From the time trans people were presented to us, especially in visual form, via movies, music, whatever it is, we've all taken this stance. We've all done certain things to say, oh, that's funny. Oh, they're gross. Take the time to watch that documentary. It has opened my eyes immensely, and I'm finding myself like wanting to reach out to my trans sisters who are in leather, who are in the LS. And it's not that I want something from you, but I want to be an ally and show you that I understand the shit that I used to do when I was growing up, or even when I came to America, even when I entered the lifestyle. Some of that shit, it's not cool. A lot of it is not cool. And it makes them, I didn't want to use this analogy, but I have to. I was watching Pose, and one of the sisters, she says, it goes from white men, white women, black men, black women, trans, gay men, gay women, queer people, and trans are on the bottom. And that's literally the structure of our society right now, period. And we as a society have to stop that bullshit. If they're black, if they're Puerto Rican, I don't give a fuck. People of color, we need to stop it.
It's so weird. It's so weird to me that, like, as marginalized communities, we marginalize ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
It feels so weird that we can't recognize that your pain isn't the same thing as my pain. However, there are similar traits within it. So why don't we come together and fight it together? Because for me, that's what I see it as, you know, and maybe that's simplifying it, but I think that really it comes down to a lack of empathy. Like if you as a human being are not able to empathize with or see similarities in what the struggles are, you know, that's where it gets crazy. Like, I think it's a ridiculous thing to think. And it's something that I always say, like, I don't understand why marginalized people marginalize themselves. It's ridiculous.
You know, I'm sorry.
I have one more thing. I'm sorry. I have one more thing to say.
Okay.
Because I'm trying not to be pissed, but I am. I'm going to be honest about it. I am pissed. I also want to know how many cisgender people invite their trans siblings or their queer people to their house. How many of y'all have shared a dinner in your intimate, safe, private space? How many times have, again, some of us posted and was met with silence? To us, that is considered a lack of empathy. Mm-hmm. That is not providing comfort, safety, and security. And you are wanting white people to not be oppressive towards us. And I am watching a lot of these cisgender Black people in the kink and leather community say the names and the hashtags in a performative way, say this Black trans name, say this Black trans name, and you can't even vote in your trans sibling into an organization. You can't even say this person is a man. You can't even say this person is a woman. And I have a serious problem with that. Some of your ancestors, like Jill Carter, is part of the trans non-binary umbrella, and that it is dishonoring their work in the community when you don't recognize that identity that they go by. Yeah. So if we want to honor our own history, if we want to honor our own elders, if we want to, as Black people, be advocates within our own subculture, it starts with those who hold the power, even in the Black community. Because I am tired of providing aftercare to trans and non-binary individuals who keep getting rejected from their cisgender siblings, even though I see them posting on public hashtags and I want diversity and inclusion from white people. Then you need to provide that in your own spaces. I don't feel if I can't feel like I'm going to be welcome in your home, then why would I want to be part of your organization? If I can't even get you to refer to me as they and them, even though on every single Zoom and video conference I use they and them, and you still refuse and use woman, you are also adding to the trauma of my life. So that means you as a Black person also aren't safe for me. So then you are making our ability to find safety and security that much smaller. And yet you are wanting more from those from white people. So you have to, yes, and I can multitask. I can say, hey, white people, all lives matter is fucking racist. I can also say to Black people, hey, Black people, stop being fucking transphobic. Stop allowing for your religion to corrode on your own ability to empathize with people that you don't identify with.
Thank you, Tyesha. I got to move it on because we only have half an hour left and we have a few more to go. Thank you so much for all of that. It's unbelievable. You know, going back to Sergru and your reference to disclosure, does anybody else on the panel have any resources that we can use, websites, books, Twitter handles, anything that anybody who's watching may want to check out as we do this work that we need to do? Some people are readers, some people are bloggers, and they just don't know where to get it. Is anything in anybody's head off the top of their head that they can throw out real quick?
Trans specific or?
I just resources in general about just, you know, us.
Oh, okay. Well, first, let me apologize to you, Tyesha. There's something you should know and everyone should know. I think when you've been having these dialogues for decades, it gets to a point where you have a different relationship with white people whiteness, and what you believe is even possible. I'm grateful for this moment in time because there's all these things that could be possible. But the way that we had that exchange, I had that exchange with white people I know. Yes, I have white friends and they know how black I am and it gets like that. But in this forum, that just struck me. So Tyesha, I apologize because that was not directed at you specifically. I think they're really important books for people to read that were from prior to now. I think people should read Negroes with Guns. I think people should read Die Nigger Die. I think if you have, and Shout Television is free, I think you should watch Soul on Shout Television and watch every episode and understand blackness from that perspective. And then there's probably a whole bunch of things I would say. But I think those things really speak to a different dialogue that, and the first two, a dialogue that will be uncomfortable, that you can have in your own space, in your own time, and do your own Q&A with. So those are the things, as opposed to books about racism, books about blackness, books about those things. Because then I'll say this overall, I think the dialogue, not just this conversation, but in general, has become so academic, it's not real. There are words I know I'll never use. I'll never say microaggression. Aggression is aggression for me, period. I'll never use it. I get it. I know what it means, but I think it makes it comfortable. And I don't think that this can be comfortable anymore. You know, because we're being schizophrenic. We want to have a comfortable, we want to make sure the conversations are comfortable, but we see people burning shit down. Like at some point, we're going to have to align with the fact that it is no longer, it has never been, and may never be comfortable. White folks may never get it. They may never get it. And if your desire is that, I don't know. But what I do know to be true is, even if you don't get everything, there's a way that I show up in the space, and there's only so, there's a way that the space will be for me. And if it is not that, I will leave the space. Because I also believe that Black people are, and again, I'm talking, we're taking out systemic racism, institutionalized racism on the street. That Black people, at the end of the day, have created all the brilliance that everyone experiences. So for me personally, I never got why the white spaces were so fucking important. Because, we're the shit. And I know I'm kind of going off rail here, but I think we need to say that out loud as often as possible in our visual, in our graphic, in our language. We are the shit. And until we get that, these expectations of the world outside. So to the even the piece about trans and women and every community within Blackness, transphobia is not a Black issue. It's a human issue. Misogyny is not a Black issue. It's a human issue. We can't take on every pathology and make it Black. We have to let those pathologies be and understand that we do participate in them. And that's what we need to heal. But then going back to square one, it's high expectation for oppressed people not to oppress other people, because oppressed people define themselves by being oppressed and don't want to be oppressed. So they look for outlets to be oppressive. Until we do that as Black people, as a community, we are always going to have that shit. So that's our cleanup. Like we're so external, and our cleanup is so internal.
I think that I would like to add that I know that you say we are so external in our cleanup, but I will also like to add that queer and trans folk are very internal with their cleanup and very internal with their education. And the thing is, we are asking for cisgender people who have more power to catch up with us too. So again, I'm asking for people to apply their intersectionality and understand that what you think is your lens may not be the same lens that everyone else is everyone else is using. And because of that, you may be missing out on the fact that other people have already been doing that labor. As again, you think bigger picture. Yes, not all Black people are caught up with being anti-Black and yada yada. Just as much as not all Black people are caught up with being caught up with not being transphobic and misogynistic and misogynor and all of that stuff too. Misogynor as a term exists specifically for Black women and those who identify under that umbrella for a reason. And so yes, patriarchy exists for all skin colors, and patriarchy also exists for Black people. I think it is really important that if we are going to tell white people, listen and go Google and go research, we also need to do that with ourselves, with identities that we do not relate to. Because if we don't, then we are also being hypocritical. And again, if you want to be an advocate, and this is going back to answering the question that Lynx just said, I would love to see more celebration and elevation of non-binary and trans labor that happens in the Black leather and kink communities, because I also don't see that. I see a lot of elevation and celebration and high fives and this person won of the larger populaces within the gender and sexuality spectrum. But it's one thing as a non-binary person to constantly see people posting about my siblings who are already dead. I am still alive. Other people are still alive. Kareem is still alive. You know, Mixed Symphony is still alive. You know, and the thing is, and it's not, I would love for us to provide more comfort and celebration in our own spaces that go beyond just congratulating patriarchy and congratulating just being gay. There's more to it than that. And maybe then those who have been doing all that labor will find the time to rest and sit on the bench and enjoy our journey and our leather without constantly having to look over our own shoulders within our own Black and brown spaces.
Thank you, Tyesha. Guys, we have about 20 minutes to go. I have 2 questions left. I'm going to knock one out because I think this next one is going to take us to the end, okay? So gird your loins. Whoo, Jesus, here we go. Call-out culture versus cancel culture. We have seen that call-out culture, it's gone viral, and it's caused many, many different forms of racism to become alive for everybody else to see. What is the difference between call-out culture and cancel culture? And to follow that up, what are the benefits and or ramifications both of those have within the Black Lives Matter movement?
I feel like I got to jump in real quick because call-out culture, I feel like it takes all types, right? I think one thing that we don't talk that much about in all these discussions is strategy. And yes, like call-out culture gets some people to pay the fuck attention and do what they need to do. Other people might need a different approach. I wanted to mention this in the question 9 about how Kai and I did this workshop about trans folks at Blackout. And it took me a long time, like a whole month, to get myself together to do that workshop and to be able to like make space for cis people to come in and ask whatever questions they wanted to ask, so they had a safe space to do that. So because there was somebody who was in the workshop who was in tears because they were so afraid of being able to even like, I don't know where to begin. I don't know what to say. But it's like, but then not a day later, we get on the cruise and I got somebody saying some crazy shit to me about, I want a trans person to be my submissive, or, I want a trans. And you're like, what the fuck? So the reason I'm mentioning this is because people, I feel like, need to decenter themselves in the conversation. Sorry, this is going back to your question 9 again, about how do we like bring in, or how do we learn more about trans people? It's by decentering yourself in the conversation. It's by, and this goes back to call out culture. I think one of the strategies is to call people in sometimes. to speak to them privately. But sometimes if you've spoken to them privately and they don't respond to that, yeah, call them out. It's time to do that, right? It's an escalation. I think that there's also something about, or this, if this feels related, about making space for people who are in the discussion, who don't speak a lot, to speak more, or making space for people who aren't yet in the discussion, or who are always listening, to speak more. There are people who, when people are doing calling out, and when we think about the voices who we hear the most, a lot of times these people are gregarious. They feel comfortable speaking up and talking. But I bet there are lots of people who have something very valuable to say, who don't like being on stage or something like that. But are we taking the time within our own community to elevate those voices? And the common thread of all of it, to me, is how can we operate with kindness? And for me, kindness is listening with the intent to understand and not to argue. That's the fundamental piece of it. Now, I don't always have the patience for it. I don't always have the energy for it. But if there's an opportunity to listen and to hear something, you might be able to say something about that. And BK, I know you might say "fuck that," and but I'm saying, I'm just saying, I'm being a little bit playful. Apologies for my tone. But I think that there's something to be said about using different strategies and applying them when it's appropriate.
Go ahead, Graylin.
Going back to you, Tyesha, you and I have very different, and I didn't think you were talking to me. You might have been, but I didn't think you were. We have very different ways of approaching issues. You're very, very good at, giving the rundown online. I'm a person who likes to contact people individually and have that conversation. And I think that all of those things are necessary because different people react to things differently. The other thing I wanted to say is, a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of telling a room full of Zoom people who were there for a leather party that as a Black man, I assume everybody who's white is racist. And the only thing I need to figure out is your degree of racist. It's still racist, but I just kind of assume that you're racist. And I think, when white people hear that, they immediately say, well, not me. But it's like, oh yeah, you carry a certain amount of racism within you because that's who you are. That's how you grew up. And you need to go back to the beginning and start working on that. And I bring that up now because I also believe as a Black man, I carry a certain amount of misogyny within me. I grew up in an all-Black neighborhood where two of my uncles were actual pimps. I mean, with the car, everything. And that's how I grew up. So growing up as a Black man, yeah, I have some misogyny within me. I have some transphobia within me. And I think it starts with me to be able to admit that to myself, but so that I can check myself, so that I could look at my behavior. If I think I'm not misogynist, if I think I'm not transphobic, I'm never going to do anything about it. So I think that we need to give people power enough and space enough to say, I am this way and I want to talk about it. I want to have conversation. It's easy to tell people to Google and that's fine. But I find that when I really want to know something, I want to know it from the heart. I want to know how that affected you. And if you're my friend, I know it's going to add some labor to you, but I want to see life through your lens. I want to see it from your perspective. And the only way I can do that is if you tell me your experiences and help me live through that. I can read all along, but it doesn't touch me to just read. I want the conversation. And that's just me. And I think that, the more we allow that to happen, and yes, we're exhausted. But the more we allow that to happen, when we can, I think we'll get better results from people.
Thank you. You know, tying it back in a little bit to the idea of this call out and cancel culture thing, you know, I had a follow-up question of my own that I wanted to just throw out there. You know, is it useful? Because if I am someone who has erred on the side of wrong, and all of a sudden I see my name in lights on all the social media apps with the thing I said, and 500 comments underneath that thing I said with my picture, does that compel me to then want to do better or to dig in and defend myself because I feel attacked? So if we are calling someone out, if we are canceling someone, does it even matter if they change or not? Or is it for the attention of just putting them on blast?
That's a great question, right? So I've always thought of call out culture as a nice way to say, or it has been constructed in this way, that it's reverse bullying. Okay, so that person may have said something that wasn't really aggressive towards one person. Maybe they made a general comment, and if everybody attacks them, then how does that person get to learn anything? What I'm really feeling is emotionally fucking attacked. Mm-hmm. I feel like hurt emotionally. So my reaction, my natural reaction to that is to be damn defensive. It's gonna be, right? There's mm-hmm. no way that I can get around that. Mm-hmm. I said a thing, maybe I didn't pick it out of context. It's online, it's in chat. It wasn't from my mouth. It was something I said online. How do we then do exactly what Steph is saying and like speak to each other with kindness in a way that I don't have to put you on blast and have 50 comments next to what you posted. I could send you a direct message and ask you, what did you mean by that? Because how I interpreted it was X. That would stop a whole lot of this. So I see like, it seems like people were patrolling the internet or patrolling Facebook for waiting for you to say something that they can jump on you about. So I don't post shit on Facebook ever. I just don't, because it always falls into that vein. And I understand the tool, social media as a tool, as a positive tool, but that I think is the scariest part of it, because you don't know, when you say something to someone or you attack someone that way, how that affects them emotionally. And there are better ways to do it.
Or do they even care, right? I said what I said could be the follow-up because they're in defense mode, right? And then the conversation breaks down because now everyone is defending position, right?
Of course.
And I don't know if there's an answer to this. This is just us talking, but there has to be a better way for us to hold people accountable without really having to go for the jugular 100% of the time. Sandy?
But I think that if you're being called out, right, yes, I understand the whole being defensive and that being your first reaction to being called out. But so this has kind of happened to me in the last month, indirectly via Recon. People are calling Recon out, right? And it took everything in my power not to jump on some of these fools on social media to be like, this is not true. Get your facts in order before you come and talk to me. Because that's the kind of dangerous thing about call out culture. Because if one person notices something about someone that said something negatively, right, everyone jumps on it without even reading the full picture. And I think that's where I kind of find call out culture kind of dangerous. However, I do think that there is something about calling someone out, holding them accountable, and you as a person that's being called out to be like, oh shit, I didn't realize. And the only way that you can really not be cancelled is if you atone. So apologizing is one thing, but atoning is a completely whole other ball game as well. Mm-hmm. Giving kind of like contributing back to the people that you've offended by your words is a whole different thing from just saying, oh, sorry, I said that. And that's where I think call out culture and cancel culture can be very, 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 very dangerous. I think 100% that people should be held accountable for things. However, I think there's a way about doing it, and make sure that before you go for someone on social media, that you have got your facts in order as well, that you fully understand the full picture before you lend your voice to start calling someone out. That's what I think.
I appreciate it. Tyesha, please.
So Lynx and I had this conversation, and I also had a conversation with Graylin before this chat happened. So there are going to be a few things that I'm going to make known. Everyone plays different roles when it comes to self-accountability, cultural accountability. And with that being said, me personally, and I've made comments about this before, but cancel culture derived from the Black community, namely Black Twitter, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And its original usage was to dismantle institutional racism and discrimination. How white people, again, appropriated that is none of my fucking business, but also fuck them for misappropriating it and using it in a way that is now being seen as an unhealthy tool. With me, because I also practice restorative justice and transformative healing, what you see in public is nowhere near the amount of labor I do privately. I have hours of behind the scenes labor educating, because I, as a person, one of my core values is that of an educator. Because of my background, I started my college degree as a music ed degree. I have been teaching my whole entire life, even in the music scene, up until about 10 years ago, but I continue to teach. Because my thing is, it's one thing to tell someone that what they did is wrong. It's another thing to teach them to not hurt and harm someone again if they are willing to not do that. So I have to, yes. So I have to, there are several, again, rubrics in my head that I use to determine whether or not someone is open to that kind of restorative justice and reconciliation. And so that also determines whether or not they are worth that kind of experience. I have been part of public conversations of which someone has been transphobic and then been part of their private journey of unpacking that sexism and transphobia and doing better. Because to me, what irritates me is when people apply call out culture in a lazy way and don't really care for someone getting better at it. And I say that in a sense of, you're throwing stones and you're running away and the person is injured, but that doesn't mean that they won't do it again.
Yeah.
And this especially applies to Black people. Using myself as an example, I have exhibited anti-Blackness in very large ways in my past. The number of people who took the time to educate me behind the scenes and provide a safe and comforting place for me to grow into my Blackness, I can only name on one hand the amount of people who did that labor. And me personally, I am one of those people because of what happened to me, and also because I have that spirit of mercy granted to me by whatever deities people celebrate, that I apply that specific space for others. Because it's one thing to be someone who's purported to be a leader in the community, who's helping to dismantle toxic structures and institutions. I also am that person that will go behind the scenes and clean it up and usually erect something in its place that is healthier, which is why I'm tired of sitting on all these boards. So, you know, I believe in cancel culture. I believe it in a way that if someone is continuously and in a patternistic way being toxic in such a large way that they are contributing to the erosion of the safety and security of everyone, including and especially our smallest and most marginalized demographic, then they do not have a space in this community and in my life, period.
Thank you so much.
Because they are not here to do better. And that is what really makes the difference.
We got 4 minutes before we got to go. BK, get in there.
Yeah, well, first of all, contrary to popular belief, I don't necessarily believe in. I know I get hyped, and that gives people an impression.
You're kidding.
Huh?
I say you're kidding. You don't get
No,
hype.
let me be very clear of something I carry, and I will say this to anyone who knows me. I remember in life all the times I was wrong. And I hold on to that all the time. I am passionate. Don't get it twisted. But I also know that it's my experience and that we're all coming in with what our experience has been up to this point. And then we, in every given moment, it was so hard for me to sit through this whole thing and not get spiritual, metaphysical, but I got to do it here. At every given moment, we have choice. Every given moment. So no matter what transpired between us a second ago, I can choose to be very different. I can choose to hear something I never heard up to this point. I can choose to know something I didn't know up until this point. And it's my choice. But I know that for me, that's true for the other person. As Tyesha said, you can have a dialogue. Oh, okay, so you're choosing to be where you are. Okay. I am not necessarily the teacher for you. It may happen in your life, it may not. But what I know to be true is that I can allow you to travel your path the way you travel your path. Because when we start to get deep, and that's why I can't get spiritual, we ain't got time, about harm and all that, then we have to, again, and just for clarity, Tyesha, when I was talking about external, internal, I was just talking about black folk, not black, ain't just black folk. But there is this very real piece of us as individual that has to be shifted for community to shift. And I ain't going to say no more about it. You got to come to one of my things to hear about all that because we don't have time. But again, I will go back to, I truly do remember, I thought differently about women than I did 5 years ago. I thought differently about myself than I did 5 years ago. I know more about BK, Kwame, Odu, whatever name you want to use now, than I knew yesterday. So in holding that, it allows me to be empathetic and it allows me to be compassionate. And that's what I think we have lost in, not in X culture, social media, whatever. I think in general, there's a piece of, I hate to go, but there's a piece of being compassionate that we are not holding on to with others and with ourselves. Because all that hammering we do on other people, we're doing on ourselves in some way, shape, or form. And typically it's in the same area that we're hammering with other people. Because that's showing us what the fuck we need to hear. So that's it. I'm out.
Thank you so much, guys. We have 1 minute to go, so I'll take this moment to just begin the wrap up process. I wish 2 hours is not enough. You know, when Tyesha and I were planning, we were like, we need to have a Black People's Church Day for one of these talks that we go in, we sit down for 4 hours and have, you know, lunch, and then we come back and, you know, maybe, but this is not the last. This is a series, so we'll be coming back to you guys in a month or so with a part 2 of this continuing conversation. But for now, I want to thank everyone who joined in, who logged in to view and offer your feedback in the comments, who's going to take some stuff away from this to marinate on. I want to thank our panelists, each and every one of you individually. Your voices have weight here and always. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't say it enough. To our interpreters, LaShonda and Cameron, thank you so much for being the voices for us accessibly. I want to thank ONYX Mid-Atlantic as well for creating this space for this conversation to occur. And just for information about the club itself, for information about ONYX and who we are and how to get involved, just go to onyxmen.com, click on the chapter that's nearest you, and you can find out how to get involved and come support us if compelled. You know, beyond this conversation of Black Lives Matter and the pandemic and all the work that we all have to do collectively as a group of humans, just continue to remain safe, remain aware. None of this is over. The pandemic is really just getting started, I believe. This conversation about racial injustice and inequality is just getting started, I believe. So be smart in your choices, make them accordingly. Remember the compassion and wear a mask. It matters. And love each other a little bit more. That's my challenge to everybody watching. Love each other a little bit more. And with that, I want to say thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your evening and weekends. God bless and take wings.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Good to see y'all.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank
It was
you.
Thank you, guys.
I gotta go to bed.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
How do you turn it off?
Well,
Click the button that says lose